It is a tremendous honour and a privilege to introduce Jonny Markman.
Hello
We're here in Cape
thanks
Town.
to Les for getting this together.
Oh yeah, it's just before Shabbat.
Yeah.
And, I'm so grateful for your valuable time. And Jonny, I heard from Ezra that you were actually in Shanghai.
That's right. It's a long story. It starts way back when in 1939, when I was born, 10th of September 1939, in Brussels, Belgium. 6 months later, Hitler, Marshal came into Brussels, and my parents had the good sense to pick up with one suitcase and leave with me, being a 6-month-old child, together with my aunt and uncle.
And where did they leave to?
Well, that was the thing. We had to get out of Belgium, so unfortunately you could only escape southwards, which was already enemy territory, Vichy French government. And lots of trial and tribulations through that whole period. We ran for about 1.5 years through Vichy France. Yeah.
Wow. And then eventually, where did you land up?
Well,
Your parents?
there's a lot of incidents in between which are Nissim and Niflois, you know what I mean?
Miracles.
And
miracles.
eventually we got to Marseille, and Marseille, I think possibly it was the American Joint that organised something for us, and they put us on a troop ship, a Vichy troop ship. Think about that, Vichy troop ship, collaborating with the Nazis. We were the only Jews, the 5 of us were on that ship.
Who? It was your parents?
And my aunt and uncle.
And you?
And anyway, it coincides with my name, Yonah, in Hebrew. The sailors on the ship, the Vichy French sailors, wanted to throw us overboard. Can you imagine? I would have ended up in the fish.
Wow, they really wanted to throw you overboard?
Yes, yes.
When they found out that you were
But
Jewish?
somehow or other, you see, I wasn't there, so to speak, to know what was going on, but obviously my parents talked them into keeping us on the ship, and we sailed around the Cape for 6 months, eventually got to Indochina.
Did you get off in the Cape?
No, we couldn't get off on the Cape because they were enemy and we were Jewish. They wouldn't allow Jews into Cape Town in any case at that time. That was against the rules.
All the countries closed their borders.
So that French troop ship was sent to Indochina to reinforce their troops there. And anyway, we got to Saigon, and eventually somehow we managed to get to Shanghai. So we got to Shanghai in 1942.
And how old were you now?
I was getting on towards 2. Okay, so we were in Shanghai from 42 to 47. That's 5 years in Shanghai. And we had a rough time there because we came out of the frying pan into the fire. Europe was Nazi. Shanghai and China was Japanese.
Just
Real
Japanese
terrorists. Anyway. And because of their friendship with the Axis, with the Nazis, they had plans already, and they started building concentration camps and had the plans out for gas chambers as well in Shanghai.
It's
So
in,
now,
it's
now
in
you
many
understand.
books.
Now you understand my feelings
You know,
towards Japanese.
there's a book called Escape to Shanghai where they mention this, and also in the Fuji Plan there's many books where they, it's a miracle it didn't happen, but there were plans.
Yeah. So I'm giving you a thumbnail sketch running through the whole thing because of the time factor, etc. And it was a terrible situation there. The Chinese suffered terribly. We Jews suffered terribly under the Japanese, not as much as the Chinese, but my dad was pulled out every now and again, taken to the police station and beaten up.
By the Japanese?
By the Japanese. So,
What is your earliest recollection?
Mine?
What do you remember what your earliest recollection, what you remember as a small child?
as far as on the Jewish side, we were in the ghetto, but then they moved us into the French quarter because my parents spoke French, although they were under a Polish and Lithuanian passport. And we managed to find accommodation amongst the Russian Jews that had come there from the time of the Russian Revolution. So they'd been there some time, and they'd worked themselves up, and they looked after quite a few of us refugees. What I do remember is that we were heavily involved with the Mir Yeshiva.
Wow, how were you involved?
My dad was very friendly with all the Bochurim there and the Rosh Yeshiva and so forth, because of the way he was brought up with being a real Jew. And in fact, I've got evidence here. My dad built a mikveh for the Mir Yeshiva.
In Shanghai?
In Shanghai. And because of that, they obviously couldn't pay him because they didn't have any money to pay, and he wasn't looking for, well, he would have liked some money, but as a gesture, they gave him a set of Mikrot Gadolot, and it's signed by, I think it's the Rosh Yeshiva. We can't decipher the handwriting, and in fact, I'd like to send this off to Mir to get an idea if they can decipher
I'll
it.
take a picture.
Yeah, and on top of it, this publication was printed in Shanghai at that time.
Wow, that's amazing. In Shanghai, under such, during wartime and under such difficulty.
Amazing, yeah.
And this is the Gadolot on the Chumash.
The name of the publisher is Fleischiker, Levi Fleischiker. And there was another one here which says something else. I can't. Hotzat Hamashpir, Shanghai, and it gives the date.
Wow.
And that's 1943.
And how did your father know to build the mikveh?
Sorry?
How did your father know about building mikveh?
Well, we have to go back now to Belgium. My parents came from Lithuania. My mom came from Shadowa, if you heard of Shadowa.
Sure.
My dad came from Vilna. At that time, it wasn't Lithuanian, it was Polish. That's why he had a Polish passport and she had a Lithuanian passport. Eastern Europe didn't allow Jews into universities. So everyone tried to get education somewhere else, and they both came to Belgium to study. They met in Belgium. I was the offspring. Okay. Well, one thing that comes up now, because of what's going on between Poland and Israel. My parents got married in 1937 in Prague. They went to visit my dad's parents in Vilna in 1938. 1938, the Polish policemen were beating Jews up on the streets. So it's nonsense what they're talking about. The Poles were heavily involved. Everyone was heavily involved.
Absolutely.
And so we've covered that.
Can we look at the first page of the what was given to your father? This is the. I'll just put it on. And if you can, I'll let you go around and. I just want to show it to our viewers. So this is. Do you ever use the? Johnny, this is amazing.
Do I ever use that?
Do you ever use? Do you use when you're doing? Do you ever use this in shul? Do you ever read?
Yeah, no, we have the shiurim. I take this with me.
You take it with, so it's actually being used.
Yeah, I've showed it to everyone, but they can't decipher the name.
I'm going to take a picture. Here's.
It says Shanghai at the bottom there.
I'm going to show it to a few people.
Yeah.
And here you can see it's.
Shanghai.
Wow, you can see how it was printed in Shanghai. This is priceless.
Yeah, you can take a picture of
Shanghai.
it.
This is. Johnny, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is priceless. It's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
So they gave this to your father
in appreciation for his work.
building the mikveh.
So anyway, so my dad studied civil engineering, and my mom studied music, and she became a concert pianist, and that's the background with my dad being able to organise a mikveh, design it and build it, you know. And in fact, I don't know if you ever came across Chazon Bagley, and
Sure.
Chazon Bagley was one of the Bochrim. We were friendly with him there. He was at the yeshiva, at Mir Yeshiva in Shanghai.
He was the cousin in Oxford Shul
And,
for a short while.
and at Claremont as well.
And once his son was in the same class as my brother.
And besides the Mir Yeshiva, and we used to go there for services or whatever it is, we were heavily involved there, but sometimes we used to go to the other shul in Shanghai, and that was run by Rav Ashkenazi.
He was there when the Mir came, before the Mir came.
Now, you can understand a little chappy like me going there with my dad and looking up at this massive figure with the Strymol. I keep on saying that the Shekhinah just appeared from him the whole time. That was that impression that I got there. So, yeah.
Do you remember the Bochrim? Do you remember the Rabbanim and the...
It's flashing past. It's the one was Zakheim, I think, was... most of them, most of them eventually landed up in America, I think.
And then some came to Eretz Israel. There was Reb Chaim Shmulevitz.
Well, I can't tell you.
But you could have, I'm sure you could have seen him.
Well, that's why I think maybe it could be him that signed it there. What else was there? Where are we going now?
And that mikveh, is it still in existence today?
Sorry?
Does the mikveh still exist today?
I don't know.
Because some of the shores they have made into museums.
I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go back to any place. I wouldn't go to Lithuania also to look at the faces of the people that killed my ancestors. So it's the same thing there.
Do you remember the poverty and the hardships in Shanghai, and people, they said there were Chinese dying on the streets? It was horrendous.
You know, it's a different story here about the homeless. At least they get up in the morning, but there, the people, they were all lying. They didn't have anywhere to go. They used to lie on the streets at night. In the morning, they were dead. I walked around dead bodies.
And you actually saw it?
Yes. Wow. The Japanese were terrible.
They're really young. That's why Sugihara, as I was mentioning, is unique. He's really unique.
Yeah. Well, why weren't there more of them? Anyway,
and they said that you had to get permission to go from one quarter to another quarter, and they made the lives very difficult.
Was split up into different concessions. There was the French, the German, the Russian concessions. We were lucky enough to eventually get into the French concession, which was a little bit more, what can you call, civilized. Yeah, so one name that comes to mind at the moment that we were very friendly with was Mr. Lichtigfeld. It's funny enough that I've got a Mishnah here which is edited by a Dr. Lichtigfeld. Dr. Lichtigfeld was the supervisor at Arcadia Orphanage. I don't know if you ever came across that.
So Arcadia was in Johannesburg?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a strange small world, you know. Wow. Anyway, so as I said before, when we were running through Vichy France, certain things happened that Hashem was really looking after us. I don't know if you want to read about it or you want me to tell you about it.
I'd love you to tell.
My parents got the idea to leave. That there was no Einbrera, you know?
There was no choice.
No choice. And so my mom picked up a suitcase and filled it up with nappies because I was 6 months old.
Wow.
But they didn't take much else. One I think my mom with one suitcase, my aunt with another suitcase, and they were travelling with that and they got to the border of Belgium to France, and they had to get on the train to go somewhere. But before you could get on the train, you had to go through a medical examination when you cross borders at that stage. And the nurse had a look at me and saw that I was Jewish, and told my parents, do yourself a favour, never come back here again. Because she said, it's very strange, but she said they're already deporting Jews from Belgium. Anyway, so we next leg of the thing, and what was it? We went through certain villages. You know, the trouble is that we, the children of that era, didn't ask questions.
Yeah.
Understand? Everything was hearsay, and if you and looking back now, we should have asked to have expanded the whole thing.
I've heard so many people say they so regret that they didn't. But a lot of the parents didn't want to speak. They didn't want. It was so traumatizing.
My parents always spoke about it, but I didn't interrogate them for broadening out the facts and whatever it is. Anyway, what is it is. And we were running through Vichy France. However, we managed by foot, by rail, by this, by that, and sleeping over in barns and whatever. And there was a ration on at the time as well. So you know, you could only get 1 egg per family per week. Luckily, my parents got 1 egg for me, and my aunt acted as a different family, got another egg. And then eventually we got to Marseille. Marseille wasn't so hot, but I remember my parents telling me that they used to go into the park every now and again just to get fresh air or whatever it is. But the one time they were mingling with all the other Jews, they got enough.
No, it's amazing.
Mingling with all the other Jews and wanting to hear if there's any news about what the hell is going on, and all of a sudden a whole lot of trucks surround that park, and my dad smells something, and he says, this is not good. Takes me in his arm and is kissing me and my mom, and he says, most probably this is the end. Anyway, they are coming. They're rounding up people.
These were Germans?
No, the Vichy France.
The Vichy France, the French.
The police and the gendarmes and the
Yeah.
And the other sort of semi-army people, whatever it is, rounding up and putting on the thing. And the one, my dad says he thinks he was a detective, was walking to us, and my dad says this is the end. He walks past.
Wow. It's a miracle.
And I don't know what was in his mind or whatever it is, but he saved us.
Wow.
Anyway, and then the other thing was the ship, the incident on the ship. So I could have been Jonah and the whale.
They really wanted to throw when they found out that you were Jewish.
They were
the French. It wasn't, we're not talking German. We're talking French.
Vichy French. They were. Everyone was bad.
Yeah.
You understand? And you know, they're talking about there's protests in France at the moment against anti-Semitism, but to me that means nothing, because the French have always been anti-Semitic. So anyway, we got to China, and we spent the whole time there with the mayor, with this, with that, and the other. And
did you go to school when you in Shanghai?
Yeah, you know, amongst us Jews, it's always education that matters most. So my parents tried to get me into some school. So we went from the one school was a Russian school. They tried to get me in there. But I didn't last long there. It was too militaristic, and eventually I ended up in a French convent.
Wow.
Which was better. I mean, you know, they really and I spoke. That's the other thing, because at home we spoke French and English the whole time. So it suited me better there, although my parents knew Russian. And my parents spoke 8 languages. So I was in the French convent there.
For how long? How long were you in the convent?
I can't tell you exactly, but it must have been a year or two, because eventually in 1945 the Americans came and liberated us, kicked out the Japanese. And when they came in, they opened up a Jewish school. And that's where I learned English. I don't know where that damn thing is. It's somewhere here. I should have pulled it out before. Anyway, I got a picture of the school that I was at.
And have you ever had a desire to go back to Shanghai?
Sorry?
Have you ever had a desire to go back to Shanghai?
No. They say that it's best never to go back to a place that you've lived in before. Because you might get... I don't know where I'll put it now. Strange.
And there's a book on the Jews in Shanghai.
Sorry?
You have a very nice book on the Jews in Shanghai.
Yeah, well, I had a picture of that is for a couple of the documents that I gave when they had the exhibition here, the Jews of Shanghai, at the Kaplan Center.
Can I just show this to... Can I show... In this picture, is this you and your parents?
Yeah.
This is a picture of you and your parents. Wow. You were an only child?
Yeah.
And this is
That's an identity document in Shanghai. That's another certificate of residence, Shanghai, and that's a picture of my Jewish school in Shanghai.
When did you have the exhibition in the Kaplan Center, the Jonny Markman story?
That must be about 2 years ago. 2
years. And it was well attended?
It was very well attended. I was interviewed on Chinese international TV.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I told them all about the Japs, because that's what they really like to hear.
And this is a book on the Jews in Shanghai.
Yeah. So that's... I don't know where... That's very strange. There's a little thing.
Oh, so I just want to bring it a little bit closer. Jonny, this is amazing. And do you have the original photographs?
Yes, it should be. Yeah, I don't know where the hell it went.
Okay, it doesn't matter. And Jonny, that's incredible.
Yes.
And from Shanghai, after the war, do you remember being liberated by the Americans?
Yes.
So now you... how old were you now? Around 6?
1945, I was 6.
6. And did you still stay in Shanghai, or did you manage to get documents to leave?
What happened is that my dad had some connections, and again it must have been the American joint that came in with the liberation set up, and they organised for us to go to the States. And all the papers were ready, and we were waiting for the ship, and the ships never arrived. Which we found out later that, and there's documentary evidence of that the State Department of the United States didn't want Jews in the States, so they stopped the ships. Nice friends we got all over the place. Yeah. There were a couple of ships that were going to go to Palestine, but we couldn't wait. We had to get out because the communists were overrunning China at the time.
It was becoming communistic China.
Again, yeah. You know, frying pan, fire. So what happened is that my parents decided to take the next ship available. The next ship went to Australia. So we got out of China that way, and we ended up in Australia.
How long were you in Australia?
About 7 years.
Really? In which city?
Sorry?
Where in Australia?
In Sydney.
In Sydney. And what made you come to South Africa? What made...
My dad had one sister that was living here. She got out before the war and came to South Africa. And she kept on nagging him to come and join her because let's get the family together again. And so he decided we're coming to South Africa. My mom was very psychic. She said to my dad, go and visit your sister, spend a month, spend 6 months there, just be together with her and leave us alone. I said, no, we got to go. Anyway, we came, it was very nice for a little while, and then unfortunately they didn't get on very well. So that started a whole sort of series of things, and my parents had a very bad life here in South Africa, really bad. I don't know if I should go into detail.
Were you in Cape Town or?
Cape Town, in Cape Town, and then Johannesburg. And so I finished schooling in Australia, and I came to South Africa, and then I went to Wits and became a civil engineer in the footsteps of my dad.
You at Wits, wow.
Actually, I was accepted for medicine in Cape Town, but my parents were battling for a living, and it would have cost them a lot of money to get me here. Anyway, so maybe it's better. And I finished civil engineering, and the overall, looking back, the overall thing that stands in my mind is that Hashem was watching us the whole way. My parents didn't have such a good life, but he was watching me, definitely, because I had to travel 3/4 of the globe to find my angel of a wife. Unfortunately, she's passed on, but that was something, and Ezra knew her.
And can I just ask, growing up in Australia and coming to South Africa, with your friends, did you tell them about your experiences, your difficult experiences?
No.
Were people interested in hearing?
No. My parents were always involved with all the other refugees there.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a lot of them were Russian Jews at the time, before the Hungarian Jews came. And
this was in Australia?
I picked up a lot of Russian being in there. But they used to talk freely between themselves, or whatever it is. But the Australian Jews, I don't think they reacted too much. I can't say. But on top of that, I mean, my dad became the president of the Poale Zion in Australia, Labour Zionist movement. I was just saying some time ago, I said, if my dad was alive at this point in time, he'd be a Likudnik. Wow. Because the left has gone ultra left. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But when you were in Joburg or at Wits with your friends, did they know that you were in Shanghai? Did they know that you were a Holocaust survivor?
Yes, yeah.
And could you speak openly? Were people receptive?
Yeah. My good friend is Helen Heldenwood. You know Helen?
Helen, I know. I saw Helen.
Yeah. So we used
I interviewed Helen about a month ago.
No, wow, she was down here recently. She knows the whole story. And we, when we get together, we talk Yiddish. And
what a small world!
We used to be at their place every Sunday for the whole day when we came to South Africa, because my dad knew her dad from the old country. And he met up other people from the old country in Joburg, and he was also quite active in the Vilnius Society that used to be in Doornfontein.
I don't think it exists anymore.
They had a house there on, what was that street called? Off Harrow Road. Anyway, whatever.
That's where the Lion Show is.
No, further up towards...
And did your parents ever consider going to Israel when the state was established?
My parents battled for a living. When my dad said, no, we're coming to South Africa, and he took all his little money, which at that time was about 4,000 Australian pounds. It wasn't much, but it was a little bit of something. And when he came to South Africa, he said, which bank should I put it into? I said, no, in South Africa we don't put it in banks. We give it to attorneys. 1 month later, that attorney was in Mexico.
He took the money.
So that started the whole nonsense, and then eventually my dad, because he was a civil engineer, they managed to rope him into the demolition business in Johannesburg. It was quite a thing in those days, and they needed a civil engineer to check how to dismantle the building and sign documents or whatever. And he became a partner with one chappie, but eventually this chappie dealt him a hell of a blow because he was taking money out of the business for gambling. So my dad was left with nothing, and eventually came to Cape Town, and he had a lucky break because he was friendly with the mayor of Milnerton, and the mayor said, you know, I can see you battling. We're going to open up the sand dunes soon for what's the word? Oh, they wanted to start building in that area, and they said, do yourself a favour, go and get a loan from the bank and buy a couple of plots. So the plots at that time were 500 rand. He bought 2 plots, and then he started getting people to start putting in foundations, this and that, and eventually built himself a house from the proceeds of the other.
Wonderful.
Yeah, lovely people, my parents. That's why I sometimes wonder where they got the strength to do all this.
And did they have any regrets?
Sorry?
Did they have any regrets? What happened, or looking back on their journey? What a journey they had!
The regrets was, now I'm reading, my dad must have written me a letter before he died. And I'm deciphering it and whatever it is, and he had regrets, and he said he should have not gone to university in Belgium. He should have tried to do something else and get his family out, because lost his side of the family all gone, my mother's side of the family all gone, and maybe he thinks maybe he could have done something at the time to bring them out.
It was, you know, Johnny, I just want to mention, in my reading, the Bochrim that were in the mirror, you said it was exceptional, and when you saw the Rabbonim, they said it was a golden age. It was just an exceptional time. But a lot of those Bochrim, a lot of those boys didn't know what was happening to their own families back in Europe. So it was exceptional times they were living in such difficult times, and yet their emunah, their belief was so strong in what they achieved. And I think with your parents to have gone through so much and knowing that they don't know what's happening with the rest of the families, and then feeling what could we have done to help, it's an exceptionally difficult position they were put in.
Yeah. And it was a bit difficult here as well for them, because I don't know if it was guilt or whatever it is, but members of his family here and their extended families also didn't want to hear about what happened. It was very strange. In fact, the one time we were walking on Sea Point beachfront when we first came here, and everyone was saying, "Shh, don't talk Yiddish." Wow. What are you talking about? Wow. So we came into a very strange community.
But now things have changed. Now people, the descendants, they want to hear so much more.
That's what my cousins come to me now, and they're crying, and they say, "We should have listened to your parents."
And that's what I'm finding. People, thank God,
I said to him, "It's too late. I'm giving you a little bit here and there, but it's too late. You could have had everything," because they're asking me about their own backgrounds of their extended families way back when. And my parents knew about everything.
Well, thank God you've got first hand.
Thank God I came here and I got an angel of a wife, and she gave me 2 wonderful kids. I don't know if you've met them in Johannesburg, David and Mandy Markman. And they followed the way.
It's wonderful. Well, Johnny, it's been the greatest honor to meet you and to hear
I
your
hope I've helped
your
you
incredible story. You
a
really
little bit.
have.
I've been wandering a little bit, but
No,
it all comes together eventually.
it's fascinating, and it's just so. It's our history, and you are a living example of our history.
Yeah, it's better not to have had it, if you know what I mean,
I
from
know.
that aspect. Yeah.
But what I found remarkable is that having seen what you saw and having gone what you saw, and having experienced it, you have a kippah on your head, and you have such emunah, and you're very involved in the community.
When we came to Australia, I went to school in Australia, the kids used to say, go back from where you came from, Hitler didn't do a good enough job.
Are you serious?
Yes, yeah. And to top it all, the government had to step in because it was becoming rife amongst the way they were treating refugees. So the government stepped in and over the radio and in the newspapers they said, please have respect for the new Australians.
Wow.
And at the time I think there was one Jewish Minister of Labour there, Landau, I think he may have pushed the thing. Terrible. I'm sure that they've still got it there because you can't change people's mother's milk.
They actually had anti-Semitic in Sydney. There were many swastikas.
So
periodically it's all over.
It's getting worse and worse now.
In France, they found just a few days ago on tombstones. They had broken down tombstones with anti-Semitic swastikas desecrating gravestones in graveyards.
I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. It's maybe could it be that through us they are attacking the Almighty?
It's very possible. Because it's very possible, yeah.
See, it's just like Hitler said. The Jews are our conscience. So we have to get rid of that because basically what he's saying is we want to be pagans, we want to do what we want to do, and the Jews are causing us to think differently. We don't want that. And I read recently at my friend's place that the Kaiser Wilhelm from the First World War blamed the Jews for his loss of the war.
Yeah.
But he had Jews in the army.
It's incredible.
You know,
there were many Jews in the army.
Yeah, on both sides.
On both sides, and I've seen when I was in Germany for a stamp exhibition, and I saw, you see actually in the Stuttgart Shul, those that unfortunately they were killed in the First World War, and they were Jewish German soldiers that fought for the fatherland.
Yeah. Anyway, so quite a few of the families in Shanghai eventually did land up in Palestine at that time, as it was called. And I remember some of the names: Tenenbaum, Lichtenfeld, I think also. Yeah, it's.
So here in Sea Point we have Rabbi Weinberg. His family were in Shanghai as well. His father was in Shanghai, and there's Yossi Goldman also. They have from Shanghai.
Yes,
and Rabbi Bokov.
Yossi Goldman's father was there at the same time as me.
And Rabbi Bokov as well. His father,
who?
Rabbi Bokov.
Bokov.
He's in Johannesburg. His parent Shirach, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, was an aide. He was a witness at the Shirach. So in Joburg alone, we have 3 Rabbonim whose fathers were in Shanghai.
Yeah, that's the story.
Johnny, I cannot thank you enough, and I just wish you mazel and bracha, and thank you so much for this.
Thanks very much.
Incredible, this
carry on the good work.
Unbelievable sharing of your life experience.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much.